week of Sports Alley here on the Husker Sports Network. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you had a good Father's Day. If you were a father, hope you had a chance to relax, maybe go play golf, whatever you want to do, grill, get some steaks, whatever you wanted to do, and spend some time with your family and friends. Hope everybody had a good time with that. Coming up this later on in the hour, Chris Basnett of the Lincoln Journal-Star is going to join us. There was some Husker basketball news. We're going to talk about that here in a couple of minutes. That came down the pike on Friday. One not so good, one was good. We'll get all that analyzed from Chris coming up a little bit later on. He covers the Husker basketball team for the Lincoln Journal-Star. We've not talked to Chris for a couple of months, so thought we'd catch up with him. But we're going to start. Sometimes, Ben, we can get into the week, kind of be a little lighthearted and have some fun, but the thing broke on Friday when we were playing our best of game that isn't lighthearted at all. It's a fallout of COVID-19, and University of Nebraska Athletic Director Bill Moose announcing that several measures intended to mitigate the anticipated significant financial impacts of COVID-19 as the department's going to reduce their overall expenses by 10% during this coming fiscal year, which starts July the 1st. Among those, a reduction in approximately 10% of Nebraska athletics administrative positions across the department. That means people's job. We're hearing the numbers right around 20 people have been let go by the athletic department effective at the end of the month. And we like to have fun. Sports is kind of the toy department of life, but right now it's certainly being affected by the pandemic that we are dealing with here. There will be no merit raises for anyone in the department during the fiscal year, no increases in all sports budgets for the upcoming year. Sports programs are encouraged to build a more regional non-conference away schedule, thus limiting public exposure and allowing for reduction in travel cost. All administrative units across the department have been asked to reduce their budget by 10%. All staff travel, excluding recruiting, is going to be greatly restricted over the coming year. A reduction in recurring capital expenditures, and the summer program for student athletes is going to be limited next summer, in the summer of 2021. So this was a step Bill Moose took on Friday. Several departments around the country have already implemented some of these. I think Nebraska was holding out hope that we would be getting better news now on the virus and the possibility of filling up stadiums and arenas come the fall. This one hurts because, Ben, you and I both know some people that we do know have been let go. We don't know all the 20 names, but we do know a few that we know and people that we've liked. And this is upsetting people's lives. This has now hit the Nebraska Athletic Department.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of felt like it was inevitable when the virus first started happening. We started feeling some of the repercussions of the impact it had on our economy and our society. Our company was hit by it. Most companies of substantial size, or even at the local level specifically, are affected by this dramatically. And Nebraska athletics isn't immune to it. I mean, I think that you look at how things like this eventually trickle down. Nebraska's fortunate to be in a position where they make a lot of money. $150, $160 million a year. And there's a lot of things that go into it. I think when people hear athletic department budget, they think of, as you said, recruiting trips. They think of, spending money on uniforms and spending money on travel and spending money on new facilities. And but as we know, and as people are now finding out, it's much more than that. It's people's livelihoods. It's the ability to go travel and play sports outside of your region, be able to do all those different kinds of things that a good healthy budget is able to provide for you. And unfortunately, just starting first from the personnel side, these are people that have been around the University of Nebraska for a long time, a lot of them. And unfortunately, to no fault of their own, because of the pandemic, are forced to find work elsewhere, where they've called Nebraska home for so long. They've been such a huge part to the university. Greg, you and I are around all kinds of people, whether it be at the top from Bill Moose to the event staffers, to the people that greet us when we walk into the stadium, to everybody, the trainers. There's so many people that make that thing go, that make that engine go. and unfortunately, some of them lost their jobs. And it's heartbreaking to hear because, as I said, there's to no fault of their own. But I think Nebraska was, as you said, holding out hope that they'd be able to put people in stadiums, but that's becoming ever so wobbly. The idea that football is going to be back and the talk of full stadiums and full go and all that has come to a screeching halt, and now it's just about trying to survive as an athletic department, and a lot of these steps are necessary. We probably won't understand the full extent to the fallout to these moves until probably after the first couple of months of whatever season kicks us off. But I think to me the underlying factor here is that I hope people realize that the athletic department budget is more than just building facilities. It's more than just plane travel to get to go play wherever you want. It's more than just spending money on laptops and spending money on the student experience. It's people's salaries. It's the ability to have these student athletes stay on campus. Eat the training table food. All this stuff goes into the budget, and I think it became ever so real on Friday when that release came out. And as you and I found out, some of our friends have lost jobs, and now that this is going to be the new norm for Nebraska athletics for a while. So unfortunately, that's where we're at, and this time has provided some tough challenges for all people, and now the athletic department at the University of Nebraska is feeling that as well.
Yeah, and hey, I understand there's probably a lot of people listening to us tonight that have been affected in one way or another. Their company downsizing, their company furloughing people, reducing pay for people. It is this virus isn't taking sides. It's affecting everything. And now on Friday we got the word that it's certainly going to affect Husker athletics moving forward. So a dark time, and you hope that we start to get some better news. I'm still optimistic that we're going to play in the fall. I don't know that I've ever felt like we were going to play in front of a full stadium. I don't think that's going to be realistic. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we come up with some kind of a treatment to the virus. We come up with some kind of vaccine at some point in time in the near future that we can put this terrible nightmare behind us. But right now we're in the midst of it. We're in the midst of a real battle here. Then pandemics don't come along very often. You really have to go back over 100 years to find one that has had this big of an impact on the world as COVID-19 has had. So I just wanted to start with that. Again, we like to have fun on this show. We know people tune in for a distraction, but every now and then we got to get serious and talk about things that are affecting people. So wanted to get that off of our plate first thing here tonight. Now, men's basketball. A couple of big things that popped since we last talked on Thursday, and this came out early Friday morning with Seamus McKnight, the men's basketball SID, putting out a statement from Fred Hoiberg saying that Kobe King has informed us that he will not be attending the University of Nebraska for personal reasons. We respect his decision and wish him the best in his future endeavors. We had mentioned a week or so ago that the basketball team had gotten back to Lincoln on June the 6th minus 3 players, Thor and Ivan, who can't get out of Europe, travel restrictions being imposed on them in France and Ireland, and Kobe King was the third one that wasn't here yet. And you kind of go, that kind of maybe should have raised our eyebrows more than it did. Kobe King was the transfer from Wisconsin who left the Badger program at semester, was going to probably be eligible from the get-go for Nebraska, a pretty high-caliber Big Ten player who was starting for the Badgers during his career playing for Greg Gard up in Wisconsin. So he's not going to come. I'm not going to sit here and speculate about whatever personal decisions he's having to deal with. That's his own thing. That's a blow. That was a guy that I was really excited about. In fact, while you were gone, Ben, we had a story from CBS Sports where they listed the top transfers in the country, and Kobe King was, I think, number 7 on the list as a guy that was going to be a big impact transfer for Nebraska. So obviously a blow. Offset some later in the day when Elijah Wood, a 6'6" point guard from the state of Maryland, reclassified. He was actually going to be a 2020-21 high school graduate. He reclassified. He had enough credits to graduate from high school, and he quickly snapped up the scholarship that was vacated by Kobe King. He comes to Nebraska, should be here within the week to start working out with his Husker team. So It's kind of a good news, bad news thing. The Kobe King one really hit me because that was a guy that I was really excited to have as a part of the Husker program.
Yeah, I think we all were. I think when Nebraska announced that they were going to be able to grab him from Wisconsin, that's a Big Ten type talent that would have come here and definitely contributed right away. Had the NCAA, made the decision that we expected them to make. However, I will say this too. That's great, and who knows his situation, his circumstance. He said personal reasons. I don't know what those are. I don't even want to speculate what those are. But I would rather it be this way than have him come to Lincoln with those issues, try and fight through it, whatever it is, be really unhappy, and then all of a sudden decide to just pull the plug a few months from now, or even a week or two before or after the season had started. If he's 1 foot in, 1 foot out, let's cut the cord now. And try and fill that spot. Obviously, they did. There was a guy that was on the hook with this staff, apparently, and Mr. Wood, that they knew that they could get on speed dial and come here and fill out a roster, and thankfully they were able to do that. I never want to say that it's a blessing that Kobe King came here. I'm not going to be that guy that said, "You'll get him out." That's not going to be my stance, but. My point is, had this happened 2 months from now or 3 months from now, that's pretty much a wasted spot. And then the coaches are in a tough decision. Do we fill the roster with anybody and be bound to that scholarship, or do we leave it open? And are we shorthanded again? At least this gave the staff enough time to contemplate what to do with his scholarship and go offer somebody and bring in somebody that they could have really used and just keep the train moving. So. On one hand, yes, it's a huge bummer that Kobe King isn't coming here. He would have helped this team win. There's no doubt about it. He's without question, Greg. You're talking about a transfer from Wisconsin who's tasted major college basketball already to a young man who should be a senior in high school. There's really no comparison in the development level right now. If they were both to be here, who's going to be in a better position to help your team win? The answer is Kobe King 8 days out of 7. But at the same time, you don't want somebody here that's 1 foot in, 1 foot out already and kind of undecided on if this was going to be the best situation for him or not. So, yes, he was able to work through those things and he ends up in Lincoln, but you would almost rather have this situation where he pulls the plug before he even gets to campus and you're able to fill that spot with somebody that is all in, and you can help develop, and you can start that college process, and you don't have to worry about every night when your head hits the pillow, is he going to be on the team tomorrow? I think that's going to be a little bit of a relief for the coaching staff, and whatever it is that Kobe King's looking for, you hope he can find it.
Very good. Those are some of the hot topics that we're dealing with here tonight on the program. When we come back, Chris Bassett, who covers Husker basketball for the Lincoln Journal-Star, will get his take on the news of King and Wood, even as his thoughts about the non-conference schedule, which came out a week ago today when we had Jake Muehlheisen on to review that. We'll get his thoughts about that. And then later on in the hour, we'll open up some phone lines for you if you have some thoughts about any of these topics. We also have some baseball talk to get into, both the Major League and for the Huskers. We'll get into that later on in the hour as well. Here are the numbers. You want to be a part of the program, 866-HUSKER, 1-866-487 on the Husker Sports Network. Hope you had a good weekend, and we're delighted to be joined now on the program by Chris Bassett of the Lincoln Journal-Star. Hey, buddy. How you doing? How's your golf game?
It's good. It's not good enough to play in the state match play this week here in Lincoln, but, it could be worse. I got out and played a little bit this weekend, so can't complain too much.
Where are they holding that?
It's out at Hillcrest Country Club here out on East O Street.
Very good. Well, it gives you something. Are you covering that? I'm taking it?
Yeah, I'll be out there tomorrow, and then I'll be out there, I'm sure, for the championship match later on this week. It's loaded field. All the big names are in Nebraska golf are in, so it should be a pretty fun time.
How much have you enjoyed having the PGA back, at least to give us something to watch on weekends?
Oh man, it's been good. I will watch just about anything sports related, and obviously I'll watch golf. So when that's the only thing on TV, you can bet I'm pretty well glued to the screen for a couple hours every time it's on.
That league has really benefited. I know their ratings are through the roof, and the fields for the first 2 weeks have been unbelievable. Minus Tiger, you've had pretty much every big name in the sport playing in those two, so that's been a lot of fun. But you and I could talk golf all the time, but people want to hear you talk about some Husker basketball. As they've a lot of news, a lot of headlines over the last week with that. How surprised were you on the Kobe King announcement on Friday?
I was surprised, and yet I wasn't. You know, we're talking about a guy that committed very early to this program without setting foot on campus for a recruiting visit. He visited here when he was playing for Wisconsin, of course, during Big Ten play. But, you know, a guy that committed basically sight unseen, you know, and has obviously spent the last few months at home like the rest of us, probably had a lot of things on his mind. You know, there's always that thought when it's personal reasons, you hope that everything in his personal life is okay and he's able to kind of get his hands around that and make sure everything's, you know, going in the right direction and under control. But, yeah, there's some surprise there. But at the same time, I think you might see maybe some more of this than usual this year with so many kids and so many transfers even that have had to, you know, commit without taking a visit and without, you know, meeting a coaching staff in person, even though they're able to do Zoom calls. So, yeah, I was a little surprised, but at the end of the day, I think there was a little bit of part of me that wasn't too surprised something like this would happen either.
Well, I think maybe Nebraska knew something because it didn't take 6 hours and all of a sudden here's Elijah Wood committing to this thing, right? I mean, that almost had to be hand in hand.
Yeah, you have to wonder that, and part of that too is Matt Abdelmassi, the assistant coach, who's kind of the recruit. Well, he is the recruiting guru for this program, and his connections all over the country. You know, with whether it be transfers, high school kids, different programs, prep schools throughout the country. In the case of Elijah Wood, coming from Hargrave Military Academy, this was a guy Nebraska was interested in. Clearly, they had offered him a scholarship already. Kind of an interesting story, you know, started out as a 2020 recruit, committed to Rhode Island, then decommitted and was going to reclassify to 2021. And then this opportunity kind of, you know, presented itself, I guess, so to speak. And all of a sudden he's a Nebraska Cornhusker. So, yeah, it seemed to work pretty smoothly for Nebraska. So you wonder if something was maybe in the works or like you said, Nebraska's coaching staff knew something was up maybe behind the scenes.
What about that spot? I mean, they list him as a point guard. I mean, they got a handful of those on this team, don't they?
Yeah, he seems like kind of the latest in a line of guys that can do a little bit of everything, right? You talk about the point guard position, and the probable starting point guard next year is going to be Delano Bann, and he's 6'8", you know, and yeah. But Delano's also a guy that can play a lot of different positions. I think Elijah's going to be the same way. Obviously, they list him as a point guard, but that doesn't mean he can't play a lot of positions. It's kind of like Wan'Dale Robinson for football. You know, they may list him as a wide receiver, but he's going to play running back. He's going to line up in the slot. He's going to do a lot of different things for you. Kind of similar for basketball, I think, with a lot of these guys, Elijah Wood, Delano Banton, Shamil Stevenson. You know, you can go on down the list through a bunch of different guys that can defend multiple positions, guys that can play multiple positions on offense. You know, I think when it comes down to it, this staff wants guys that are skilled basketball players that can handle the ball, that can pass the ball, that can shoot the ball, and then you kind of plug them in wherever you may need them. You know, I think that's what you're going to see these rosters kind of look like going forward as Coach Hoiberg and the staff kind of get more and more of their players into this thing and get them ingrained in the system. And it's just guys, they may be listed at a certain position, they may be listed as a point guard, but that doesn't mean they can't play the 2 or the 3 or, you know, maybe guard the 4 on defense or whatever it may be. So, yeah, he's probably going to be a point guard listed that way, but that doesn't mean that's the spot he's always going to play all the time either.
Visiting again with Chris Bazin of the Lincoln Journal-Star, covers Husker basketball for the Journal-Star. Nebraska making some moves late last week with the subtraction of a player, but quickly filling that scholarship with Elijah Wood. You probably get this question, because I do quite a bit when I'm out talking to the folks, is, man, a whole new turnover of this team. I don't know that I look at it that way. With Ivan and Thor back and the 3 that sat out, and you mentioned Banton earlier, they really were a part of the program a year ago. To me, there's been an upgrade in talent. Do you see it that way, that they've upgraded the talent with the incoming guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an upgrade, you know, all the way across the board, whether it's talent, depth, length, size, physicality. You know, you can just tick off all those things that Fred Hoiberg has talked about over and over. You know, rebounding ability. all those things I think have gotten better. Now, does that mean it translates to Big Ten play? Well, that remains to be seen. You're obviously talking about the toughest college basketball league in the country, and as we've seen, if it gets going bad in the Big Ten, it can go downhill in a hurry no matter how good you are. So, but yeah, I think on paper, this roster, the talent is a lot better and the depth is a lot better. I think you saw, even with Thor last year, as good of a year as he had, he got tired at the end of the year. His shooting percentages went down. He was just having to play so many minutes. And that's as a basketball player, obviously you want that. You want to be able to play as much as possible, but boy, it really takes a toll on you physically, mentally, emotionally. And when you lose a bunch of games, that doesn't help either. So yeah, you mentioned the two returners, Thor and Ivan, plus those three guys that sat out. Those are three guys that are going to play a lot of minutes for Nebraska this year. So yeah, there's a lot of new faces, but at the same time, you're going to have five pretty key guys that have been around this program for at least 1 year. And in the case of Thor, now he's going to be a senior, and Ivan being a sophomore. So there's guys that are plenty familiar with what Fred Hoiberg wants to do, and those guys I think are going to be looked at to kind of bring this group along as they start getting together.
Chris, it was a week ago today that the non-conference schedule was released. What'd you make of it as you broke that those group of games that are non-league games for this team?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of matchups that are really intriguing. Of course, the first one that comes to mind is the Kansas State game down at the Sprint Center. I think that's one everybody's looking forward to. But, you start looking at the home games, and I had a few people tweet at me or ask me about, the home schedule, it isn't real tough, outside of Creighton, or isn't on paper isn't real tough outside of Creighton and then maybe one or two others. Well, you got to remember, you're playing 20 Big Ten games too. You're going to, the chance to, build up your net is going to be there plenty in Big Ten play. And we're also talking about a team, as we just talked about, you're going to be ingraining a lot of new faces onto the floor that didn't play last year. And you need that non-conference to build continuity, to build consistency, especially in a year like this when who knows when they're going to be able to practice together consistently. Who knows what the schedule will ultimately look like a few months from now, with all these guys being apart, not being able to even see each other face-to-face until a couple of weeks ago. You need time, and you don't need a meat grinder in the non-conference, especially at home. You need games that are winnable games that give you a chance to kind of feel good about yourself at home, and then give you, some more confidence going into those road games and those neutral site games. And I say neutral site games, look at the Myrtle Beach tournament and some of the quality teams that are in that. Dayton, Pitt, there's all kinds of Mizzou will be in that. There's all kinds of quality in that too. So I think some folks maybe look at the home schedule and go, that's maybe not great. But you start looking at the games Nebraska's going to play away from Lincoln, and I think there's a good mix there of winnable games and games that are really going to challenge this team before conference play starts.
It's also a program coming off 7 wins, too. I mean, you have to kind of factor that in when you're trying to put that together. Again, visiting with Chris Bassett of the Lincoln Journal-Star. We also crossed paths with Chris out at Haymarket Park, maybe the most active coaching staff on Nebraska has been Will Bolt and those guys. It's been busy the last couple of days. Luke Sartori, kid from Lincoln Southwest, is going to come play for Will Bolt. C.J. Hood, younger brother of Byron Hood, announced today that he's committed to Nebraska. Ben McLaughlin has just posted that Max Anderson, the state's Gatorade Player of the Year, is flipping from A&M to Nebraska. How about Will Bolt and this staff? Those guys are not messing around, doesn't appear.
Yeah, we talked about the basketball team recruiting, and man, the baseball team's really leading the way, like you said. And a lot of that I think goes back to the day Will Bolt had his hiring press conference, and when all his assistants spoke for the first time shortly after that, and they talked about Lance Horvell, who's the recruiting coordinator for Nebraska, talked about they want to build a fence around the state. And boy, if we haven't seen that this summer, especially these last few weeks, I think you're just seeing guys that maybe see an opportunity and a chance to play for the hometown school where maybe there wasn't one before. So we know Nebraska has long been able to produce high-quality baseball talent out of high school, and I think what you're seeing out of this staff is kind of a renewed focus on guys like that and a renewed effort to keep as many of those guys in the state and get them to Lincoln as you can. So, yeah, Nebraska baseball has been as active as anybody, and they've been as successful as anybody. It's one thing to be active recruiting. It's another thing to be successful. I think the hit rate for Nebraska, especially these last few weeks, has really been through the roof, especially with guys inside the state's borders.
Chris, those baseball people have had a lot of late downtime since the season got banged on them, and one of the things that they're talking about is moving the season back a month. I think that would really be beneficial to a program like Nebraska, don't you?
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that proposal. And, similar things have been talked about in the past. But this one really seems to maybe have a little more momentum for getting passed, for getting put into place. It makes so much sense, especially from an economic standpoint. Certainly for a quote unquote northern school like Nebraska, and obviously all the schools in the Big Ten, it makes a lot of sense. You and I both sat out at Haymarket Park in early March and sat through some of those games, and they're not a lot of fun to sit at. And that's just the way it is, with the weather in Nebraska. Now, if you push everything back a month, attendance gets a little better. You get to the back end of the schedule when high schools are out for the summer, and you see attendance, I think, is going to get a little better. So, yeah, in my mind, it makes a lot of sense. I think it'll benefit everybody, even, SEC schools, Pac-12 schools, ACC schools. But certainly a school like Nebraska is going to benefit as much as anybody from a lot of different angles, not the least of which will be the number of fans that they're able to get into Haymarket Park early in the season and late in the season.
Yeah, I think you'd have some huge crowds at some home series in June. Chris, we appreciate it as always. Have fun covering some golf this week, and hopefully we're back at some press conferences here soon. Greg Sharp, Ben McLaughlin with you. Mentioned right at the end of the Chris Bassett interview that Gatorade Player of the Year Max Anderson is decommitted from A&M, is going to come stay and play for the home guys in college baseball for Will Bolt. It's been a pretty active couple of days. I was talking to Chris about how active it's been for basketball. I think our most active recruiting is going on right now is our Husker baseball program, Ben. Luke Sartori, C.J. Hood. I mean, it's been crazy the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's been pretty phenomenal to sit back and watch happen. And the amazing thing about this, Greg, is they're all Nebraska kids. Will told us when he came here that there are players good enough in this state that can get us back to where we once were. And you look at some of the commitments that Nebraska has on their team right now, and who they have coming in not this year, even next year. There's a steady pipeline of players from the Omaha metro area and even beyond. In C.J. Hood's case, Norris and junior college players as well that have ventured off. But this is pretty dang impressive what they're doing, locking down. I mean, to get Max Anderson, who a Texas A&M offer here in the state of Nebraska, especially in Omaha, is a big deal. It's a really big deal to get offered by a school like that. And he says due to circumstances out of his control, I'm not sure if it was maybe academic credits transferring. I don't know if it was virus related. I'm not even going to pretend to speculate on what the issue was, but doesn't matter. I don't really care what they are. He's coming over to Nebraska, and you start to look at Nebraska's class in 2020 and 2021 and the job that this staff has been able to do without even playing a conference baseball game yet. I mean, Greg, these guys haven't even played a Big Ten game. This coaching staff hasn't, and they've been able to lock down the border and get a couple of the biggest prospects, of course, Max Anderson and the 2020 class, and maybe the biggest one to keep an eye on if you're Husker fans more long-term is Drew Christo, who is absolutely lighting it up in some showcases around the country, touching 95 with the fastball. He's still got a whole nother season of high school ball before he even makes it to Lincoln. He's got a whole nother year. That's a guy that will be drafted. Just imagine, just uncertain how high he'll be drafted and if he'll make it to Lincoln. But to be able to get these guys to want to stay here and believe in the vision of Coach Bolt, it's so exciting for guys like you and me and all the Husker baseball fans out there that this is starting to happen, because as we've seen, there's really quality baseball players in this state that can help this team win.
So Max Anderson, the Nebraska Gatorade Player of the Year, Millard West shortstop, had signed with A&M, but is going to be let out of that deal and is going to come to Nebraska. Evan Bland from the Omaha World-Herald has tweeted that Max Anderson becomes the first Nebraska Gatorade Player of the Year to play for Nebraska in a decade. How about that? 2 of them were drafted. 2 of them ended up going to K-State, 1 to Creighton, 1 to Kentucky, 1 to Wichita State, and now Max Anderson coming to Nebraska on the backs of the Luke Sartori news from earlier in the weekend, and then C.J. Hood, the younger brother of Byron Hood, who announced on Twitter he was committing to Nebraska today. He will be a part of the November signing class for 2021. It's pretty exciting stuff there for Husker baseball. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. The number if you want to dial us up with a comment or a question. We'll come back and give you the bad side of the baseball news, and that's an update on what's going on in the Major League Baseball talks to get their season underway. We'll do that next. Bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Greg Shire and Ben McLaughlin back with you. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. We're giving you the news on Husker baseball with several commitments over the last couple of days for Will Bolt's squad, including the big one within the last hour of Max Anderson, the Nebraska Gatorade Player of the Year, leaving A&M to come back to play for the Huskers here. The news from Major League Baseball and the prospects of seeing Major League Baseball this summer took another hit this afternoon. The Major League Baseball Players Union voted on the latest owner's proposal. They defeated it 33-5 is all that. So now tonight, apparently Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, is having a conference call with all the owners. The commissioner does have the ability to just mandate that they're going to play. And there's talk that if he does that, it's going to be a 48-game schedule and then expanded playoffs, hopefully starting at the end of July with a 48-game schedule. Ben, are you to the point where are you done? Do you just want to say, if it's 48 games, I don't want any part of that, just get ready for spring training and we'll see you in February down in Arizona and Florida?
I've been kind of over this situation for a couple of weeks. I mean, I feel like it's such a joke now, what's happened. My worry now isn't so much this season because, in my eyes, this season's gone. I mean, the season's gone. I know they're talking about mandating a season and all that, whatever. My worry is now, how deep is the Players Union burying themselves for the new collective bargaining agreement for the next 5 years at the next agreement? I mean, I feel like no matter what happens, the damage is already done. When it comes time to renegotiate the sides of what they want, what's fair, this is already like they've already burned all the crops to the ground, and it's just like you're imagining sitting at a table when there already is no relationship. And you're trying to be productive in what you want. I just don't see it ending well. I really don't see this going well the next time these groups sit together at a table and try and negotiate what they want and what they think is best for them. So that's my worry, and I think it's a pretty serious one. Our boy Trevor Bauer kind of said something about that on Twitter after this was vote down 33-5 with the vote today. So my worry isn't, again, this year. It's more so what's going to happen when this is all over.
The baseball is operating under a collective bargaining agreement, a CBA, through the 2021 season. So they're under contract and have an agreement for next year. Then it's off the table. So a lot of people think now the posturing is for that next collective bargaining agreement, and that makes baseball this summer seem, to me, pretty unlikely. And I'm kind of with you. You get to the point now where you're like, why bother? Just shut her down. Don't worry about it. We've gotten along fine. We're still living our lives now without baseball for the last 3 months. We hope we have football camps open in about a month to 6 weeks. We're going to just put our concentration into that. You guys have a great offseason and then get yourself ready for spring training. Hopefully that there's a vaccine and there's no interruption at all next year. And then, for gosh sakes, get something done with your next CBA.
I know, and that's the worry, because there's no way that they walk into those meetings, Greg, with an open mind and put their egos and feelings aside. It's incomprehensible to me that that's going to be the case. There's going to be egos, there's going to be agendas, there's going to be scores to settle. All that stuff's going to be on their minds, even more so than what they want to get accomplished when those two sides meet again. So, yeah, we'll just kind of wait and see what happens.
Crazy stuff. As I told Chris Bassett earlier on in the hour, at least I like golf. The PGA's been 2 tournaments under their belt now. NASCAR's been running. Big controversy there over the weekend that we're going to talk a little bit about later on in the program. At least those 2 sports are going. You got the EPL, pro soccer in Europe, that's back playing on the pitch. You got the NFL about a month away from camps. You've got college football about a month away from their 6-week wrap-up, hopefully for the season. So all that stuff's good. And you got baseball over here, kind of messing around. It just kind of pulls you down. I want to thank Chris for being a part of this hour here of Sports Sunday. Always good to hear from him. Have not had him on for about 3 months, so good to catch up with some of the latest news with Husker basketball as Fred Hoiberg and the guys continue to retool that program. All right, back for hour number 2 of our Monday Sports Sunday here on the Husker Sports Network. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope all the fathers out there enjoyed themselves. Hope you were treated well by your family members. Coming up this hour, we're going to talk with Scott Docterman of The Athletic. He covers Iowa athletics, and certainly been a lot going on with the Hawkeye football program, including today. Their athletic director said they are cutting off ticket sales for the upcoming season, now looking at very much reduced crowds for football in the fall. We'll hear what that's all about. And other things, we'll get an SNBL, our Sports Nightly Baseball League update. We're into the playoffs. We're into the league championship seasons. You just heard Austin give you the scores from earlier today. The 2 user teams that are left is my team, Hickman, and Josh's team and the Minnesota Mammoths. So we'll get a full update on that a little bit later on. And then we'll also have our weekend winners for you coming up in the other hour as well. So you talked about a lot of things happening with the Iowa Hawkeye program, and guy with his finger on the pulse of all of that is Scott Docterman of The Athletic joining us now. Scott, how you doing? How you surviving all this craziness of COVID-19?
Yeah, we're doing okay with that. I think we've got a few more infections at Iowa than probably there were a few weeks ago. But other than that, I think we're doing okay over here. How about you?
You know, it's just kind of like Groundhog Day, really, kind of the same thing day after day, kind of hoping for some positive news. And I know all of us really just desperately want to have college football back in the fall. And what caught my attention earlier today was Gary Barta, the athletic director at Iowa, saying they were stopping ticket sales. What is that all about? Was that surprising? Was that not surprising? How did that news get received in Iowa?
I think people were expecting it a little bit. A few weeks ago, Iowa made that decision to just keep pressing forward with season ticket sales, whereas Iowa State cut it off at 30,000. Iowa State was believing that there would be it would be half capacity, 50% capacity, where Iowa was still trying to push to think that maybe it would be full. But I think right now it's the realization that we're looking at best 50% capacity for the football season, if not lower. So I think rather than continue to sell some of their three game packs or single ticket sales, I think they decided it just makes sense to go ahead and stop at the season ticket sales mark, which is about 60% of the stadium. Then they can kind of curtail it from there.
Scott, update me on the team. When did they get back? Are they releasing testing results? They're not doing that here at Nebraska. What about at Iowa?
Yeah, they're very transparent here. They arrived on campus 2 weeks ago, the players did. The first week they only had one positive test, which was pretty good, I think, all things considered. But as of today, there are 9. And that's including several other athletes. Basketball players came back last week, but I've heard that it's pretty much all football at this point. So they conduct tests every week. They announce kind of what their results are. So that's positive, but still there's getting that many positive tests coming back is also a challenge to see where this goes, because a lot of people are going to have to be in quarantine because of it.
Scott Docterman's with us. He writes for The Athletic, covering the Iowa Hawkeyes. You have had a lot to talk about in Iowa City over the last couple of weeks, and some of this started with Chris Doyle, the longtime strength and conditioning coach, who was accused by a lot of former players and a lot of NFL guys for the Hawkeyes of making racially insensitive remarks. He has now been shown the door. Kirk Ferentz has had to kind of navigate a real strong storm. Where does all that stand right now in your eyes?
Well, right now, I think that was the right thing to do. I mean, and kind of take an inventory of not only the players lobbing, accusations. As you mentioned, there were different types of players. There were those who left and were disgruntled. There were those that weren't necessarily stars that made those accusations. There were NFL players who have high profile here. So they came from all directions, but the majority of them, the ones that probably left in good standing or are now NFL players, all believe that Kirk Ferentz is part of the solution, not the problem. And then in checking with some of the parents and of the current players, they kind of feel the same way. So Kirk Ferentz is, by allowing these players to have a voice, they had a very explosive team meeting 2 weeks ago. It was uncharacteristic is pretty much what I've been told, that the way that people came out and, there was yelling, there was potentially fighting, there was crying, there was just all kinds of different events that went on in that meeting, but they all seemed to be together a little bit more than they had been before because, Doyle had been with Ferentz for 22 years and was arguably the best strength and conditioning coach in the country, but he was also fairly divisive because he kind of used bullying-type techniques. And I know Kirk Ferentz knew of some of them. I don't think he knew necessarily of the racially charged ones, but even so, without having him there, a lot of the players think that it's been kind of a lift off their shoulders, if you will. So right now, but it all remains to be seen how this turns out in the next couple of months to football season, because you can say all the right things now, but when it really gets to be a big deal, we'll see how they all come together.
Scott, Kirk's son, Brian, is the offensive coordinator. His name popped up, too, in some of the allegations. What's his status? Has that kind of moved on by?
His status right now remains intact as the offensive coordinator, but Iowa hired an outside law firm to investigate the football team and the racial charges that were lobbed against the coaching staff, Chris Doyle, Brian Ferentz, Seth Wallace, and some of the others. So when they come back with their full report, if there are significant charges leveled against Brian Ferentz, I think his chances to stay with the team could be squelched, which would be really interesting considering Kirk Ferentz is the head coach. So right now everybody else is status quo, but I think going into the future it all depends on what comes back with that report.
Yeah, we're visiting with Scott Docterman from The Athletic. He covers the Iowa Hawkeyes here on Sports Nightly. Scott, it's certainly been an interesting time. I think the tragic murder up in Minneapolis set off a firestorm that's gotten the conversation started across the country. I know there's been a social media policy in effect for the Hawkeye program. What exactly has it been, and is that changing as they're moving forward?
Yeah, it changed significantly. In fact, there was a Twitter ban until a couple of weeks ago that Iowa had, and it was kind of archaic, but they were able to use Instagram and Facebook and some of the other platforms, but they were not allowed to post on Twitter. So up until a few weeks ago, that was the case, and then originally the plan was, okay, you could have one tweet approved by the administration and the football program to go out. Well, that didn't work. And so as of that day of that meeting, which was 2 Mondays ago or 2 weeks ago, then they were freed up to use Twitter. So it's kind of liberating for those players. It's something that other players hadn't had. And, a lot of it came from different situations that they've observed over the years. I recall one in particular that they identified, I think had to deal with Kenny Bell at Nebraska, I want to say. Maybe it was his dog that died after a game, and a fan really came back at him in a really nasty way. And they're like, we don't really want our players subjected to this, and without any and there's no filter attached to Twitter as there are even some of the other platforms. So I think that was part of the reason for it, but I think they realized that, that's just not the way it's supposed to be, especially in 2020.
Yeah, it's the worst kind of fans, in my eyes, of the fans that go after these student athletes. It's just reprehensible for me. I don't know how some adult could think that that's appropriate to do. Well, you didn't have a spring practice. Update me on the quarterback situation. Is that settled? Is that going to be played out when we get into late July and August? What do you think of the quarterback spot?
Right now it's pretty much settled, and that's Spencer Petras. He was the backup last year. He'll be a sophomore this year. He played at the same high school. In fact, he was recruited by Nebraska and Mike Riley, and liked Nebraska, but as soon as Mike Riley's status became really up in the air, I think that's when he started looking around. He was originally committed to Oregon State, but he's got an incredible arm. He's from Northern California, went to the same high school as Jared Goff, and can really sling it. And considering he has a pretty healthy assortment of wide receivers at Iowa that we haven't seen in many, many, many years, he'll be able to get it up and down the field. Now, will he be able to make the right plays in the right situation and the check downs and not rely on his arm strength? That remains to be seen. But I think there's a lot of faith in him, and this is going to be one of the easier transitions quarterback-wise that I've seen at Iowa. There's really no competition to speak of. Although if freshman Alex Padilla or incoming freshman Deuce Hogan, make it interesting, that would be certainly something good for me to write about. But right now I anticipate it's going to be Spencer Petras.
Did he get any snaps at all last year?
Yeah, he played in, I think, 4 games. He scored a rushing touchdown. But Nate Stanley really carried the day. And, In fact, late in the Nebraska game, Stanley was hurt. And there was some question as to whether or not he'd be able to finish the game. And Petras was ready to go in. And Brian Ferentz said afterwards, hey, if he would have gone in, we wouldn't have held anything back. So they really think highly of him.
Well, Scott, we appreciate the update. You've had a lot going on. I mean, we've all had different angles to cover during this shutdown over the last 3 months, but I don't know that anybody's been as busy as you guys have over there. We appreciate you coming on and updating on us on all this. Take care of yourself. Stay healthy. Let's hope we have some college football going here in a couple months.
You bet, Greg. That's my goal. I hope we can talk college football here in a couple of months.
Sounds good. Thanks. Scott Docterman with us from The Athletic. He covers the Iowa Hawkeyes. He joined us on our Sports Only hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse. Greg Shaw and Ben McLaughlin with you again. Thanks to Scott Docterman of The Athletic, spending some time with us. He certainly has had a lot on his plate over at Iowa as the Hawkeyes have dealt with some accusations of some racially insensitive remarks by their strength coach, who they now have parted ways with. And then today's announcement by Gary Barta that they are cutting off their season ticket sales in anticipation of not having full crowds for fall football over there. Ben, it's been the last week it's been hard for those of us who love the sport and want to see college football played in the fall, because it's been a lot of negative news. Big groups of players at LSU, Clemson, Alabama that have been testing positive. Scott said Iowa hasn't been too bad in their couple of rounds of testing. Nebraska's not releasing that information, so we don't know what's the status of that is here. Part of my feeling is I almost feel like if guys get it now, then they're going to be immune to it later, and so they've kind of cleared through it. And you hear the term herd immunity. Maybe that's the course we need to go until we can get a vaccination, just kind of like the old days of chicken pox, where you threw kids in the house and said we want everybody to get it, so then we're done with it after a certain amount of time. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to be making some of these tough decisions that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, and then you throw in the fact that there's 6 figures in deaths too. That that I don't know that I'm not a medical professional. I'm not somebody that's an expert on the coronavirus. I don't know what would be the best course of action, but I do think we were a bit naive maybe to think that this problem was just going to kind of go away, that things would resume with colleges and universities and teams, and things wouldn't be affected. It was incomprehensible that players and staffers would just not get it. I mean, I think that was pretty obvious. Now the big question then becomes, what happens when they do get it? What's the protocol in place? What's the procedure? What's the quarantine? What are all the rules that you have to follow that happens when you have a positive test? All of those questions are being put to the test right now of how you handle it. And I think this is definitely we've seen some spikes in some testing at universities, as you said, that it's causing some concern for the decision makers of college football. I feel like we've been saying for a while now, Greg, that we still have a few months before kickoff, but we can't keep saying that, because every time we say that, more and more days are kind of pulled off the calendar, so to speak, and you're running out of time to put a plan together. So at some point, a decision is going to have to be made. I know the NCAA passed their kind of schedule of guidelines of what the structure, what the schedule is going to look like to get these teams ready, but if these numbers keep still pouring in at an alarming rate, the athletic departments are going to be pretty hesitant to put fans in the stands.
I also have a thought, too. I think we're focusing on the wrong figures. I think the positive tests, it gets all the attention. I don't know that that's right. I think hospitalizations ought to be what we're tracking. How many people are in ICU? How many people need ventilators? And obviously how many people are dying. Yesterday, and you probably haven't heard this today, yesterday was the lowest number of people who died from COVID-19 since March 24th. Have you heard that all day today? Probably haven't, because we're not talking about that. That's good news. That's really good news. We had the fewest number of deaths from COVID-19 yesterday since late March. That is a great trend down. What I think we're happening is we're seeing the positive tests with the younger generations, which this virus has a hard time taking out. You get it. Your body, those bodies are younger, stronger. They're able to fight this off. It's had really little mortality rate of young people. So I think all those things need to be factored in. And I'm not trying to blame news people. They're doing their job. But we get caught up in the positive tests. But to me, the bigger thing is, are people having to go to hospital from it, or do they get positive, they don't feel bad? That's the other scary thing is, I think a lot of people are walking around and have had it, don't feel bad, don't even know they're carrying it. But it's tough. It's going to be a tough call about this thing. You know, I also want to keep in effect, you mentioned 6 figures people have died from it. It's tragic. It's awful. Over the same amount of time, in the United States alone, 1.5 million people have died. So it's less than 10% of people that have died over the last 3 months. It's just, it's the circle of life. But, again, these are tough decisions. Ted Carter, who we haven't had on for a few weeks, was on our affiliate in Lincoln last Friday. He said, he was asked, what do you think? He goes, my expectation is we're playing football at Memorial Stadium September the 5th against Purdue. He said, what I don't know is how many people are in the stands to watch it live. But he goes, I do think we're going to be playing football in September. So that's the president of the university saying that. I'm glad I'm not him. I'm glad I'm not Ronnie Green. I'm glad I'm not Bill Moose having to make these really difficult calls.
Yeah, and part of it because, as you said, there's just so many things that come from it, and having to, determine pretty much everything that we've just discussed in the last 10 minutes. Is it just the young people? Are we going to expose the people that are at the games? If we are, how much of it is our responsibility? How much of it is their responsibility? What about members of the staff? The players themselves aren't necessarily going to be feeling the effects of the virus, but what about trainers that are older, or even head coaches? You think about some of the older head coaches, Greg, that are around and would be affected, if they caught the virus. So there's a lot of residual things that make this decision so difficult. Because if it were just 18, 19, 20-year-old kids out on the field playing, from what we do know about the virus, chances are it wouldn't affect them too much. But when you're cramming 100,000 people in the stadiums, and I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered with it, and I don't know that there's a right one. That's becoming so difficult, is depending on where you're at, who you listen to, what your state's practices are compared to another state. There's not just an easy answer. You can't just throw some guys in a room and say, all right, well, we got to figure this thing out, and it's a Rubik's Cube, and all the sides are the same color. And you go, all right, boom, we got it. It's done and over. You can't do that. And so I think that's the problem that everybody's having right now, is figuring out, how do we continue our lives? How do we continue living as a society, not just in college sports, but with restaurants, with just day-to-day things, while at the same time protecting ourselves from this virus, from the people that would be affected by it? It's a tough conversation to have. As I said, there's no easy answer, and if there was, we probably would have found it by now.
We had a call today, and one of the scenarios thrown out is, if we're playing football, are they going to allow people on the sidelines? Would you be allowed, as our sideline reporter, would you be allowed down there? We don't know. We don't know some of the answers to those things.
Well, and I had that conversation with my wife a couple weeks ago, just about, she kind of asked, who was all on the side. Think about all those media people that are on the sidelines. There's 400 photographers, and there's social media people, and there's former players, and there's former staffers, and those sidelines are so jam-packed as it is, and then you've got our sideline reporter, you've got the other team sideline reporter, you've got TV sideline reporter, you've got camera crews following the sideline reporters around. There's just a lot of congestion on those sidelines, and as I told her, I would be shocked if those numbers are the same, whether I'm included in that or not. There's going to be severe restrictions of who's down there allowed on that field and who isn't. Because of this deal, and it might even be, what we have in place at Memorial Stadium. That's not the case in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it might be different from stadium to stadium. So I think that's another thing we're just going to have to, not just us, but, people that do have field access are going to have to, get ready for.
Last week we got the calendar from the NCAA Sports Council. They said, all right, you can go back, start doing 20 hours a week beginning July 24th. At some point in time, the conferences are the ones that are going to make the final call. The NCAA really doesn't, for FBS football, doesn't really have a whole lot of influence because they don't operate the championship. The bowls are independent. So the NCAA, so it's really the conference commissioners. So for the Big Ten, it's Kevin Warren. And you talk about what a tough first year on the job for him. I mean, he takes over January 1st from Jim Delaney and immediately has a pandemic to have to deal with. So I really believe that week after the 4th of July, there's going to have to be some concrete things like we're go. But I also think, Ben, this could be one of those things where it could change week to week. If we start September the 5th and we go, and then we get to September 12th, and on a Thursday, who's our opponent that week? Central Michigan. They might call Nebraska and go, guys, we're not coming. We just tested yesterday, and we had 25 guys. We don't have enough players. We're not coming. I mean, I think it could be just that wild of a deal this fall where something could change 48 hours away from a kickoff.
Yeah, and I don't know that we're all prepared to have reasonable reactions to those things. Imagine what that was like. Try and relive in your head what that was like with the Akron Zips, right? With just a storm and circumstances that were just thrown our way immediately, and how many different ping-ponged ideas were around what was going to happen with that one game. Now imagine something like that happen to multiple teams for multiple weeks. I mean, that could be potentially what we deal with. Greg, it might even be as severe as the deals where the NCAA says, all right, you've got 12 games on your schedule, you count 10 of them, or you only count a certain amount of your 12 games with maybe a game or two buffer in there, or something along those lines that are so drastic that sounds so ridiculous right now. Something's going to have to be put in place, because I think the reality of it is the likelihood that every team plays the same amount of games this year, I don't know that it's that realistic. I don't know that you can expect teams that are dealing with the athletic budget shortages, are dealing with the lack of numbers in terms of players and in terms of staff and all those things. It's not inconceivable to me that that affects teams to the point where they can't play a football game. I definitely could see that happening.
I just think it could be – I just think we're going to have to be prepared for everything. And I don't know that you can. I don't know that – Dr. Fauci last week said, well, football's going to be played. Those players have to live in a bubble. You can't live in a bubble. You just can't do that. And that's going to mean scramble mode, I think, from week to week, where you and I are sitting there, you're getting your Husker game day program ready to go on a Wednesday, and then you find out Thursday, boop, no game. Well, we're off till next week now, so see if we can give her a go next week and see if enough players are healthy enough to play in the game. It's just going to be crazy stuff, I think, for the coming months until we get some kind of vaccine or some kind of treatment for this thing to get it under control where people have confidence that you can hold your event. 866-HUSKER-1, 866-487-5371. More of the show, including an update on SNBL. We'll do that next. Sports Highway Baseball League brought to you by Dorothy Lynch. We're in the playoffs. We're into the league championship series, and 2 user teams still alive, Ben, and that's the way we had it structured. That was the way it was going to fall out. It really wasn't a chance for a third or fourth user team to get to this level.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the way we had it structured, with 2 teams in the same division, one of them being the wild card, it made it impossible for that to be the case. But yeah, I think things have gone pretty much to script. Harriers would have loved another win today to go up 2-0, but a 1-1 split of them and the Dodgers today. The Minneapolis Mammoths took care of the Twins today, 8-5. So hopefully just a couple more games that we have to get through, academic games at this point, just to get to the World Series to see the matchup that we're all hoping to see, which would be your Harriers against the Mammoths.
Josh's team had the best record during the regular season of all the teams in our league, and I had the second best. So that would kind of Makes sense if that's the way it plays out. We'll see. We'll have 2 games from the American League tomorrow, so 2 of the Mammoths Twins games tomorrow, and then Game 3 of the National League Series starting at 11. Austin will join me for that. Austin, any surprises to you as we've made our way through the playoffs?
Not really. I mean, Kimbrel blowing that save today was a big one. He's been really, really solid all year long. I'm a little surprised, too. Major League Baseball has quite the streak of a wild card team making it to the World Series, and Ben and I were the 2 winning wild card teams, so I thought that boded well for at least one of our 2 teams, but unfortunately, well, for me at least, and Ben, Greg, you probably argue the other way, unfortunately the wild card teams are out of the running for the World Series, but now we're left with the 2 best regular season teams, or we will be left after just a few more games, so in that aspect, not surprising at all.
What do I know? I thought the Farmers and the Lions would be the ones that made all the noise, and they both got beat in the wild card round, so they were out a couple of weeks ago. Ben, we've had people ask, or what are we going to do with the Twitch channel when we're done? I know we're working on some things for that down the future, but the athletic department last week announced a Madden tournament coming up for UNL students, and they're also going to have kind of some former Huskers that are going to battle to play the student winner. This ought to be a kick. That's coming up later this week, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you know, if you have a son or a daughter or anybody that you know that is a current UNL student that likes video games and plays the game Madden, they can enter a tournament for free and go compete and try and win some awesome prizes against their peers. And it's a tournament that will be held next week, and it's free to enter, so go ahead and pass that information along. Just follow us on Twitter at Husker Sports for all the information. You can scroll through and find the announcement that the athletic department put out. But if the winner is able to make it out of the bracket with the UNL students, they'll get a chance to play either Tommy Armstrong, Jeremiah Searles, or Kenny Bell for kind of a quasi second championship, if you will. So it'll be an opportunity to get to know them a little bit and again win some cool prizes. So again, free to enter. Just go check it out and go play some Madden football against your fellow students, or if you have somebody that you know that might be interested in that tournament, it's open for registration.
The Husker Twitter account is where you can go access the ability to get signed up for that, and that should be fun. Esports is really something that's kind of blowing up across the country. I've really not played much of that. I know you have. I think, Austin, you've played some esports, but this is something that's really making some headway, particularly on college campuses around the country.
Right. That's not officially sanctioned by UNL, but Campus Rec has started putting on a few video game tournaments every year. I think Madden was one of them. Maybe they did an MLB The Show one. I don't recall. Maybe that was just a dorm room thing. But Super Smash Brothers has been big for a long time. That game's been around. Campus Rec has put stuff on like that. So, yeah, it really is starting to grow. I think we're still a ways away from it becoming a university-sanctioned varsity-level sport competition, whatever you want to call it. But it is making a lot of headway. We're seeing Campus Rec offer, and I think that's a big first step.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this kind of goes together. And I know, especially now during the pandemic, with so much time at home, a lot of people are getting into the video game world. And there's some older people listening right now that are kind of laughing that this is even a thing. But I think they would be floored to see how much money is in the esports industry and how much money there is to be made and how many young people's careers have been made and the amount of money that some of these guys have made. Like, we're talking 7-8 figures in their careers just for playing video games. So there's definitely a market for it. There's definitely money to be had, and there's definitely a lot of interest in it, too, especially now during the pandemic.
All right, so, yeah, if you know a UNL student, tip them off. They might want to be a part of this thing. Again, it takes place next week. And they're playing for, I think Mountain Dew is offering up a year's supply of product for the winner of this thing. So it's going to be kind of cool. And, again, I think this is something over the next decade is really going to blow up, and has started to blow up around college campuses. 866-HUSKER-1, the number if you want to be a part of this one. We'll come back with this week's weekend winners. That's straight ahead. Our weekend winners, I do want to update you on Major League Baseball. We told you that the Players Association voted down 33-5, the latest proposal from the owners. The commissioner, who can overrule all this and say we're going to play and lay out the parameters, he's on a call tonight with the owners. Apparently, the owners are asking the Players Association if they can report to camp by July 1st and then sign off on health and safety protocols They've asked the union to respond by 5 o'clock Eastern Time tomorrow. In other words, Major League Baseball is planning on trying to put together a 60-game schedule that would start the weekend of July 24th, is when that would start, with a short spring training beginning July the 1st. So sounds like we're going to have some baseball. I don't know how excited I am for that, but that's what the commissioner looks like. He's going to go forward with that moving forward. So July 24th, which is the same day that college football can start spending 20 hours a week with their student athletes. It's the same time frame for that as well. All right, let's get into this weekend winners. Ben, what you got?
Yeah, boy, it's pretty hard not to give some kudos to the Nebraska baseball staff. I think the work that they've done this weekend to pull a couple of recruits, a junior college transfer from right there in Lincoln, to get Byron Hood, his little brother, a legacy, C.J. Hood, to commit today, and of course Max Anderson, the big news today. Obviously, the news just coming out today, but all of the work being done this last weekend, from what we're understanding, to get those young men to commit to Nebraska. So definitely my winners of the week. And I guess the kind of caveat to that's just the state of Nebraska, to be able to see all these young high school talent players, these talented players, be able to stay here in the state and play for the Cornhuskers. Might make it a little, more incentive to come down to Hawksfield and watch them play.
Huge news that came out while we were on the air tonight. Max Anderson, the Gatorade Player of the Year from Millard West, had signed with A&M in November. Obviously, some quotes up by Evan Bland of the Omaha World Herald in his story that because of the shortened MLB draft of only 5 rounds, A&M's roster was overloaded, and Max Anderson asked to be released from his scholarship obligation. A&M obliged, and so he quickly became a Cornhusker. So huge news that came out a couple of hours ago. All right, Austin, how about your winner of the weekend?
Well, we just got off of Father's Day weekend, and my winner has to do with fatherhood. So Trevor Ariza plays for the Portland Trail Blazers, and he's been involved in a pretty lengthy custody case. He has a 12-year-old son, and the mother of Trevor Ariza's son decided to grant him a court-ordered 1-month visitation period, but it wasn't, a month ago, and it's not after the NBA season gets over. It's right when NBA's picking up. But Trevor Ariza has decided to not compete with the Blazers. They're about 3.5 games out of a playoff spot. He's not going to be around to help the team. He's going to take that 1 month. He's going to go be with his son over this month, the 1 month that the court's going to let him be around him. And I just think that's really cool. Not that he needs the money. He's losing between $1 million and $2 million in salary. He's been around a long time, so money isn't the issue. It's just cool to see a guy put the family first like that, even in the midst of a big playoff race like this.
Don't you think I don't know that he's going to be alone. I think some other guys may follow that lead and just go, particularly if you're a team that's maybe not even going to make the playoffs, you may just go, I think I'm just going to skip this thing out. Am I crazy, guys? Do you think that could happen?
There's already been one. Davis Bertans is shooting about 40% from 3 for the Wizards. He's had 2 torn ACLs and enters free agency after this season. So he's already informed the team that he plans to sit out because he wants to test the waters in free agency. He thinks he's made himself some money. So Ariza and Bertans are the first 2, but I'm with you. I think there'll be some more dominoes falling that way.
Yeah, it could be. My winner is going to take what was a horrific situation in NASCAR and turn it into a good thing today. Bubba Wallace, who was an African-American driver on the NASCAR circuit, back in his pit area yesterday, he found a noose that was left in that pit area today. Their race got banged yesterday because of rain down in Talladega, so they raced today. And before the race started, his car was escorted to the front of the line to come out of the pole position by the other NASCAR drivers. Richard Petty, who hasn't been in a race for years, the King, showed up to show his support for Bubba Wallace. I think that's taken a really bad situation, Ben, and making something positive come out of it. NASCAR certainly wrestling with all this. They're now banning Confederate flags to be displayed in areas that NASCAR controls.
Well, and what it's done is it's sent a hell of a lot louder message to the person that did that coward, soulless person to do that action was trumped tenfold by the reaction of NASCAR and the NASCAR family. So what he thought was, or they or whoever thought it was a fun way to throw a jab and to preach their views on Bubba Wallace. Really came back to bite them today to see all the solidarity that was put together by NASCAR. Not something I'm typically interested in, but I have a new favorite driver and someone to pull for now, and that was really cool to see today.
Ryan Blaney, driving the Ford car, number 12 car, was the winner today at Talladega. They did allow about 5,000 fans through the doors to watch that race. First time NASCAR has allowed fans to come into the tracks to watch some racing. So that's my weekend winner here today. Coming up tomorrow night on the program, we're going to get the Blitz back. We took a week off from the Blitz last Tuesday to have the Scott Frost press conference clip, so we'll check in at Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan tomorrow night. We'll also have Top 10 Tuesday. We're mulling over the greatest father-son duos in sports. We'll have some fun with that one tomorrow night. Another hour of Sports Nightly coming up. Come on back with us.